Thank you very much, and I'm pleased to be part of this program. I'll just start out with just one comment. I'm not going to do any rebuttal. I don't really see a lot of issues here, but I'm just a good old Texas boy, and I say this: when you see a problem, you try to solve it. When you see an opportunity, you jump on it. I think that's what it's about here. And as far as consumers go, I say, folks, let's let the consumers make the decision, but let's have some consumer choice. Let's not just limit their choices. And I think that's a huge issue in the city of Houston. Our great city has enormous potential, but we face increasing challenges that we have to talk about. Together, we must do a much better job of attracting and managing growth, planning for the future, and setting reasonable standards and procedures to improve the quality of life in our city. This means finding the right balance for the betterment of the economy, the betterment of the environment, and the betterment of community, particularly neighborhood life. Today, our increasingly diverse and complex city is a much different place than it was even 5 years ago. And there's a lot of details related to that in terms of demographics and population and social problems and so forth. This calls for a new level of thinking to sustain our quality of life. In this global new economy, and believe me folks, we live in a very different economy than we did 5 years ago. Informed planning, urban design, outcomes-driven policies and standards must play a larger role in shaping the future we all want. This is not an either-or situation. We must come together in a very civic way to find that both-and middle ground. Now, I want to talk a little bit about the challenges that we face, and I want to let you know that when I say Houston, I'm a city councilman, I mean the city of Houston. I don't mean the region. I mean the city of Houston, and that's an absolutely critical distinction to make, because if we just say Houston, we talk about the region and don't make the distinction between the city, we're not really getting to the point. And here's some of the issues the city faces. The city's declining share of the region's growth. We get about 12% of the population growth in the last 5 years, about 23% of the jobs, 19% of the new homes, and that's declining. We're losing, Houston is losing, the city is losing its economic vitality. And the growth rate in the city of Houston is less than 1% a year, whereas in the region as a whole, it's about 2.5%, one of the faster growing regions in the country. We have the highest transportation costs of any city in the nation, $12,000 a year. We're the only city where the transportation cost exceeds shelter cost. And if the slide comes up, you see where Houston stands. We're not a low-cost city when you add transportation and housing costs. We're about the same as Boston, and we're more expensive than Phoenix, Chicago, Dallas, Detroit, Miami, Atlanta, and Philadelphia. That's something we need to take it. We've got a serious problem there, and when companies want to locate in Houston, they see these figures, and they question whether Houston's a place to go. We've got a very inefficient infrastructure pattern in the city. We're very fragmented. Los Angeles, which we always think of as a low-density city, has 2.6 times the density of Houston. Most people don't realize that. That means that in Houston, if you need to send a garbage truck out to pick up garbage at one household, we got to drive 2.6 times as far as they do in Los Angeles. And the same way with police answering a call. We're a very expensive city to service. And we need to think about how the city becomes more dense. We have a very inadequate big city light rail commuter network and a very limited public transit network. We're not prepared for high energy prices, and we're 10 to 15 years behind Dallas and Denver. We have very high crime and poverty rates in this city. I'm talking about the city now, not the region. And we're the second most dangerous city of the 9 largest cities in America, over 1 million people. We've got a serious problem, folks, with crime. We have outmoded development codes, and we need to change that. Our codes just don't work. They don't work for development. They're not business friendly. They're additive. We need to change that. And we've got a lot of growth pains that we all know about. Every neighborhood meeting I go to, I hear about traffic congestion, crime, neighborhood deterioration, flooding, air pollution, blight, poorly regulated nuisances, and mediocre quality development and neighborhood conflicts. We got a lot of fixing to do, folks. It's little things too, like sidewalks, curbs, and those awful overhead utility wires and poles. So where is the growth in the region going? I can tell you it's going, these are some ads from some major builders in Houston. They're not building in Houston, in the city of Houston. They're building out in the planned communities. They're building in what we call the lands. That's the Bridgeland, Sugarland, Pearland, and in a lot of the muds that are outside the city limits. And there's very high quality development out there. I would admit, I wish we had some of that development here in the city of Houston. We need that very badly. So I want to just mention a couple of myths. The idea that Houston is comparable to Portland is not even worth discussing. We're just totally different cities. Secondly, that housing affordability is due to the lack of planning and regulations. San Antonio, the housing cost is a lot cheaper than Houston, and we're about the same as Dallas, and they have planning, they have zoning, they have urban design. I can't make the connection between affordable housing prices and regulations and zoning. Basic planning and development standards will shut down real estate development. Absolute nonsense. Look at San Antonio, Dallas, Sugar Land, League City, even booming Galveston, all cities with planning and zoning and regulations. That's where the investors want to go because they want confidence and predictability. I'll rush through. There's a couple of more that the last myth I'll mention is that Houston lacks development regulations. This is not true. We got a lot of regulations, folks, mostly subdivision driven, and they're terrible, and we need to change them. So I've got a pro-growth agenda for 2020 for this city, and it goes like this. Plain and simple, the city needs more growth, quality growth. I'll tell you, folks, zoning is not in the cards. There's no point in even thinking about it. Zoning is not in the cards, as was explained by the previous speaker, but we got to ask some questions, important questions. What kind of city do we want in 15 to 20 years? Do we continue to lose an increasing share of regional growth, or should the city switch tactics to compete with the suburbs? Do we want a first-class rail transit system to compete in the global marketplace, or do we remain stuck in our cars, polluting the air we breathe? Targets, my friends, targets for eminent domain, because that's the only way now to expand our freeway system. If you don't want eminent domain, you better invest in rail transit and have a balanced transportation system. Do we want continued conflicts between neighborhoods and developers, Ashby high-rises, metaphorically all around town? How do we protect our neighborhoods and property values from blight and adverse impacts? So here's my program. Number one, first order of business is we got to overhaul our development ordinances. It's going to be a job, and everybody needs to be a stakeholder, but we can do a better job to have simpler, more user-friendly, business-friendly development ordinances for the city of Houston, driven by subdivision regulations and the exercise of our police powers. And it'll give us the predictability and should provide the incentives that developers and neighborhood people need. We need to adopt a general development plan with a strong economic development aspect, with a focus on international commerce. We need to set benchmarks for economic growth in the city. We're not getting enough. And the expansion of our revenue base, that's absolutely essential. The plan should include a multimodal transportation network, comprehensive stormwater management. We got a serious flooding problem, and we need to deal with it in a very systematic, rational way. Identify priority conservation, infill, and redevelopment areas, and I'll say again, zoning is not in the cards. And I think we need to identify 8 to 10 higher density mixed-use town center sites linked by rapid transit. That's the general plan. Next, we need to set up a city office of economic development to help developers, to assist them. They're really frustrated doing this with Houston. To assist them in getting their projects approved and working through the system. And I think part of this economic development office should be to oversee a large public works project, which I call